I love that dinosaur background. A year and a half. I'm still not sick of seeing it.
I love having it still on there because it kind of harkens back to my own home of Orlando, Florida, the home of Disney and COVID. What new strain is going to be unveiled this season? Find out. Anyway, allow me to digress. Hi, this is Storytime with Jesse Bradley. I am Jesse Bradley, not Storytime. Storytime is not here today, and I'm sorry about that. Each and every time that I do this, basically I improvise a story or essay or monologue. We're going to find out what happens based on, and it changes from season to season. So the first season I did this based off of prompts, whatever inspired me from the previous improv set. This past season, I used attendance cards that I draw on a daily basis, cap in 3 minutes to capture kind of the flavor of the day. This season, I'm going to do something a little bit different just to play with the format a little bit more. Just as a friendly content warning, some of the subjects that I may discuss might be sensitive and potentially triggering. I have no idea where I'm going to go. And so just letting you know, content warning, blanket warning, things are going to happen. Also, anyone who I name in my stories, I will have changed unless the person who I talk about is aware that I'm most likely telling a story about them to just protect their identities. So I started doing a weekly comic strip for Meow Meow Pow Pow Lit called Life Hacks with Jesse Bradley, and that's kind of the theme for this season. Is I'm going to tell stories based on life hack prompts. Some of them I've actually done comics on, and some I have not done yet. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to allow the chat to kind of pick which one we are going to go with. So let me do this. Screen is shared. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to do a slideshow. All right. So here are the, since I'm doing 5 stories this season, these are the 5 prompts. And I'm going to eventually do a story on each of them. And again, I do not prepare these whatsoever. If I may have someone in the chat pick one of these 5. And I see here, we're waiting. I need to have some theme music. Do, 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 do. So 5. So 5 is how to avoid thinking about your own death. Wonderful. Let's make some tragic. It's about March or April of 1993. And I've just come home from, well, it's later that night from middle school. My parents are split up at this point. So it's just my mom and I'm, having to be home at night because she has to work nights to keep a roof over our heads. And my mom's actually home this time. And my mom, she looks at me and she goes, "Did you know that CJ died?" And CJ is a classmate of mine at and this I'm not changing the name of whatsoever because this used to be the name of the school, Stonewall Jackson Middle School. That's how you know you're in the South, is when you have schools named after Confederate generals. And the moment that my mom tells me this, I start bawling. CJ is one of the greatest torturers that I ever have in elementary school. He comes up with the most terrible of nicknames, terrible for a kid, like Messy Jesse, after the same garbage pail kid Messy Jesse, for those who might be familiar with the Garbage Pail Kids Topps cards. He was the one who pointed out the way that I walk. So my feet point out, my knees are straight when my feet point out, and my knees are crooked when my feet are straight. So he calls me duck walk because I look like a duck waddling around. And I will admit to this, I still pick my nose when I'm nervous. It's a nervous thing that I've always had for a long time. So he calls that out. It's, the booger eating Jesse. One of his greatest acts of torture happened when I was 7 years old. I am, so back, at least back when I was in elementary school, our elementary school was only about 2 blocks away from the community center. And the community center had a pool. So the first 2 weeks of May, you got to learn how to swim as PE. What a really awesome experience. It's one of the few advantages of living in Florida, not just for our Florida man stories, but you're able to get swimming lessons in school. At least you could back then. I don't know now, because probably the liability, and probably because, they don't want to, have kids drown and then, have the school blamed because the kids drowned because they were trying to teach them how to swim. It's parental responsibility. And this is first grade, and I'm the only one wearing a Speedo because I think that, me making bold fashion choices at 7, it's something that I have done and used to do because I didn't know any better. And my mom would let me make these choices to teach me a very, very valuable lesson instead of talking me out of, wearing these things like Speedos at 7 and Dayglow orange shorts at 12, things that would make me a target, rather than my mom go, I think that maybe that's not a good idea because you're going to get picked on. My mom lets it happen. It was important for her that I had these life lessons to be toughing me up, which is why we went to Stonewall Jackson Middle School. And I'm in the bathroom and I'm changing. And Chris, CJ, he picks up my Speedo and he puts it in the urinal and he flushes. Now, most people, when this happens, when you're naked, most people would get dressed and then go after the person who has just flushed your Speedo down the urinal. Not 7-year-old me. 7-year-old me chases CJ outside, chases him out, trying to go after him because I'm so angry at him because he has flushed my Speedo down a urinal. And as I am running outside, my entire first grade class is lined up. And I don't remember this part, but my best friend, of doing the math in my head, 36 years, he tells me that he still remembers the screams of everyone, including himself, seeing my naked 7-year-old body and my very tiny 7-year-old penis chasing after CJ. So I am not a fan of CJ at all. I think CJ is one of the worst people on the planet because he has brought so much pain and misery and just awfulness to me. And how it happens, how CJ dies. CJ was walking his bike across the street at the same crosswalk that we used to cross in elementary school, Gaston Foster Road. It intersects at Curry Ford Road. And he was doing the right thing. He had the right of way. He wasn't riding his bike. Trying to ride a bike across the street on a crosswalk is not a good idea. It takes momentum for you to pedal. I have tried it from time to time, and I don't. As a cyclist, it's just not a good idea to try to just cycle across the street. So he's doing, and crossing guards make you get off the bike and walk across the street. And there was no crossing guard at all. It was after hours. And he lived close by. So there's Sir CJ walking across the street with his bike. And the driver doesn't see the red light. The driver just runs the red light and it pulverizes CJ and his bicycle. And when my mom tells me this, I just start bawling and I start crying, and I don't understand. I don't understand any of this at all, because I am 12 going on, no, 13 going on 14. And no one in my life at this point has died. I mean, no one that was like of my age, because generally 14-year-olds don't really die like in your life unless it's a really, really hard life and things are just really, really bad. And I hate CJ so fucking much because of everything he's done. And here I am crying, I am weeping, I cannot stop crying because I knew him. I knew this person, that this person was once a part of my life, and that person was gone. And that was the first time that like death actually really like showed up firsthand in my life. And I know I'm trying to tell a story about how to avoid thinking about death, but it's not something that you can easily avoid, perhaps. So the second time where death visits my doorstep is, so my father, I never really knew my father, just as a frame of reference here. My mom had to run away with him in the middle of the night because he was terribly abusive, and he died of an overdose or AIDS because he shared needles. And so I never really knew him, but I had this father figure in my life named Paul, who treated me like his own son. And he would take me to Yankee games. This is why I love the Yankees so much. And he would make me try my first beer, which at 5 years old, I didn't really like because it was beer. And I'm 5. I unfortunately grew out of that. And we were close until the divorce. And he's the father of my younger brother. And he chooses not to stop. He chooses to stop talking to me and my younger brother because, well, he has a new family, and he's decided it's either his new family or him, or it's his new family and him, or not at all. And I'm 19 years old, and I'm perfectly good with that, and I'm okay with that. But my younger brother is 12, and he is, to do that to someone is not okay. And I am at the National Poetry Slam. So I used to be a slam poet. I'm a recovering poet, and I say recovering because poetry is kind of like alcoholism almost, or being an addict, where it, if you let art do that to you, let art corrupt you, like, well, I wouldn't say corrupt, it's not really fair. It basically, art can make you, can make you, when you're too focused on it, make you very focused on the wrong things. So I'm a recovering poet, and I call my mom because I'm in Minneapolis, because that's the 2002 National Poetry Slam. This is 20 years ago, and my mom tells me that Paul died, like he died in his sleep. And I am in a city thousands and thousands of miles away. And even though that Paul has chosen, he essentially disowned his own like biological son, and really stopped talking to me, that I haven't talked to him in like 4 years at that point, 3 or 4 years, that I start crying and bawling in a strange city, and like seeing, like talking to people about it, talking to complete strangers who are like seeing me just absolutely like be ruined by this. And it's so weird because I hated him so much for what he did, that he chose this new family and he only knew for a few years over his own son, over me, who's I knew him since I was 5 years old. He would put me on, it was well way before 5, it says like 4. He would put me on his shoulders to go to Madison Square Gardens and take me to see Barnum and Bailey Circus. Like he would buy me like favorite like matchbook cars and Hot Wheels on Fridays. He was the one that talked my mom out of grounding me. He was also the one who banged my head off a wall because I had my report card for 3 months in 7th grade, and they finally figured it out. So my mom used him as an enforcer to do the things that she was not strong enough to do to me. And despite all of this awfulness and all of this just pain, I cried. I started just bawling and weeping, and just I could not stop crying because it was an awful and terrible thing that he was gone. And despite these things, I loved him and I missed him, and I wish that it didn't happen. The only time I never felt like this, the only time, was when my grandfather died 3 years ago, this March. The last time I saw my grandfather alive before my grandmother's funeral was in 2012. I was in town at a wedding for a wedding, and my mom goes, "Jess, you need to see your grandparents while you're there." And at this point, my grandmother has had Alzheimer's for about 3 to 4 years. Like, it was showing up during my first wedding. My grandfather having to orient her into, making sure that she was all there. And we were collectively, the family, other than my mother and me, were in denial about this, that my grandmother didn't have this at all, that she did not have Alzheimer's, that there was no way. It's like, it's just dementia. It's just, she's just getting older. Like, all of these things are fine, because sometimes when you're in grieving about something, denial is that first stage of, here you are. And I don't believe my mother necessarily that my grandfather's not taking care of my grandmother. I don't believe her. Like, they've been married for over 50 years, 50, 60 years. I have this very romanticized ideal about love and about marriage, despite being at this point divorced once, that, I still believe that love is everything. And so I go to their house in New Jersey, and I walk in, and there's my grandfather. My grandfather like greets me in the back door, and then he yells for my grandmother. He's like, "Bird, Jesse's here." And my grandmother walks out, and she's wearing this really dirty nightgown. Her hair is a rat's nest. And everything that my mother said was absolutely true, that my grandfather was not taking care of my grandmother at all. And he had the means, and he was not doing it. And that's the last time I saw my grandmother alive, was as like this dirty rat's nest ghost. And it was so hard to be there, and I couldn't be there. I escaped by pretending that my friend, the groom, needed me to like be there for something. And when I saw my grandfather in the coffin, years later, it was the first time, like, it wasn't my first funeral, But it was the first time I didn't feel something. And I knew this man for a long, long time. He was my grandfather. He was, you know, he was the guy who took me in when my mom had a honeymoon, and he bailed us out when we were struggling, and he did all of these things. And it's just, there's some things that you cannot forgive, that you cannot forgive someone, even those like those terrible things that happened with me with CJ and with Paul. Like, they did terrible things, but they were also part of my life, and it was complicated and it was messy, but they also never betrayed like someone that they loved. And I know that's why I was angry. I'm still angry at my grandfather, because of doing that, of not being there at the worst possible moment, which that's what marriage is all about, being there, not just the best, but at the worst. And I think about all of these things, and I know death is inevitable. I know someone who died in their sleep who was a friend. I know someone who, I dated someone who died a year or so ago from cancer. It's, the older we get, like, we stop going to weddings and we start going to more funerals. And there's not really a way to think about not dying or death. It's not possible. But what you can do to not think about it is just not be afraid to do the things that you want, because we only have so much time here. So yeah, that's how to avoid thinking about death. I know I have a couple of minutes. I do want to promote really quick. I do my weekly comic strip series, Life Hacks, over on meow meow pow pow lit.com. I know I'll post it on my own. I know Highwire will be kind enough to also share the comics as well. It just started 2 weeks ago. My second strip came out this Sunday. It's Sundays. I'm trying to think if I have anything else going on. And I'm going to be starting like actual. I'm so excited about this, being part of an armory team, the Barracks, starting on Wednesday. Super excited about that, and I'm so glad to do it because it's been so long since I've played with others in improv. So I will be much more cheerier and hopefully funnier, or just at least more honest than I already am being honest now for that particular show. So yeah, this has been Storytime with Jesse Bradley. Thanks.
Thank you.